Getting second citizenship in a European Union member country can open up a whole new world of opportunities. And yet, it is not without its potential challenges. Today, I'm going to walk you through the pros and cons of getting an EU passport in 2026 and tell you who should be focused on getting one and who should steer clear. This is a big debate among our clients here at Nomad Capitalist Studio. We have some folks who come and say, I would never want to be associated with the crumbling European Union. I'm going to stay far away. Give me Caribbean citizenship by investment. Give me African citizenship by investment, or give me anywhere else but Europe. And then we have clients who come and say they would like the ability to live in Europe, even if just for part of the year. I want my kids to have that chance. And hey, being European, that to me is more of a badge of honor than a problem. I'm somewhere in the middle. You know, I've worked towards citizenship through a golden visa program, and I would gladly claim that EU passport when the time comes. I've talked about that in the past, but I do that in the context of having multiple passports and being highly diversified all around the world. But if you're American, Canadian, Australian, Mexican, or from anywhere else in the world, and you're looking at getting a European passport, here are the pros and cons. Now, here's what you want to understand. There is no European Union passport, per se. You could get, quote-unquote, the worst European Union member state passport and live anywhere. And so we've had clients ask, why would I want a Bulgarian or Slovak or a Polish passport? I don't want to live there. Well, you get it, because it opens up the whole rest of the block. And so that's the biggest pro of a European Union member state passport. Live, work, study, absolutely anywhere that you want. And that comes with a number of benefits. A lot of our clients are looking for high quality education for their kids. And so you've got that in Europe. You've got much more affordable universities than you would find in, let's say, the United States. Even more affordable for you if you are European. And so you have that special access. You want to get a job there? Well, you can get a job anywhere in any of the European Union countries. That may not be a great benefit for Americans because the US is the one country where salaries are higher than what you'd find in Europe. But if you get that Polish passport, yeah, Poland's heading in the right direction as they're really increasing their economy. But if you'd rather go and work in France, you can do that if, let's say, there's more demand for your career in France. You can start a business anywhere in Europe, or you can simply live there and start your business somewhere else. You can also take advantage of Europe's numerous tax incentive programs. And so I'm going to talk about a number of the pros and cons around taxes and some of the confusion that often exists there. Let's say you get that Polish passport by Ancestry and you want to move to Greece. Greece has a special lump sum tax program where you're going to pay a rather limited amount of tax, no matter how much money you earn. And so even though Greece is not known as a low tax country, they have rolled out the red carpet for a certain number of years. The same way that Italy has, for example, to where you come and live there and you get a very favorable tax deal because they'd rather have something than nothing. A concept that countries like the United States, Canada, and Australia have really yet to figure out. Of course, European passports are some of the best for travel. We say that every year on our Nomad Capitalist Studio Passport Index, as the top 10 is widely populated by European passports. And I think this is particularly important because while, being US and getting an EU passport isn't full diversification, it is in some ways a step in the right direction. What you're also getting is, let's say you are American, and one day you don't want to be American because you don't want to deal with the taxes no matter where you live. You don't want to deal with that geopolitical baggage. You don't want to deal with the fact that as an American, it's harder for you to get a bank or brokerage account or invest in certain things, and that your business is subject to more restrictions. Maybe one day you don't want to be an American. You can always give up that US passport. And if you're Italian, that's largely a push. And if you don't really care about living in the United States, it's actually an upgrade. I think other Western countries could model the United States in, with things like extraterritorial taxation. Canada's talked about it. The UK is starting to talk about wealth taxes. Indeed, France has talked about it, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But I think the travel overall as a European will be better than the US or other Five Eyes nations in the future. Now let's talk about the cons. Taxes in Europe are high. Now, again, I told you on the pro side, there's a lot of countries that have opened up and said, hey, if you haven't lived here before, please come on in. In 10 or 15 years, we'll charge you a very low rate of tax, or we'll exempt your foreign income, or we'll do something to where you could pay a lower rate of tax. This could be lower in many European countries than you would as an entrepreneur living in Dubai with their 9% tax. However, of course, if you choose to live in a high tax country, you're going to pay higher taxes. And my point on France is, you want to be careful which European passport you get. France has talked, and Nomad Capitalist Studio has been telling you for over a year now about imposing some form of extraterritorial taxation. It wasn't that long ago that a lot of these European countries got rid of their wealth taxes. It didn't bring in that much money, and it was hard to collect. Now they're talking about bringing it back in some cases. And so again, that's more, at least for now, going to be tied to where you live. And so I think the key thing to keep in mind when you're evaluating pros and cons is, where do I want to live if I get a European passport? We've had clients where they get their Italian citizenship by Ancestry and then they go and live in Malaysia. You're not really going to be subject to the high taxes there unless Italy decides to tax you no matter where you live. And that's probably not happening anytime soon. Again, France has talked about it. The UK has talked about it. Obviously not a European Union state anymore. And so being a Nomad Capitalist studio follower, go where you're treated best. Having that European passport for yourself and your family, but choosing to live in low-tax Malaysia, to live in tax-exempt Uruguay, or to live even in Eastern Europe. I mean, that could be a great way to go. And having a very strong passport, having the ability to go back somewhere with a very high standard of life anytime you want, if you decide that's worth it. Having the ability to move within the bloc is not a bad thing to have, but you do have to be aware of increasing Brussels overreach. That's one of the cons. What are they going to encourage their countries to do if it's not citizenship-based taxation? I don't know that that's happening anytime soon, but it is some worry. Again, it is probably more of a worry in the states that are really falling apart. Geopolitical risk, I think, is less than the US, but there is some. I happen to love having, let's say, a Caribbean passport because they don't bother anybody. I like to have totally neutral countries in my passport portfolio. But if you have most European passports, is that going to make you a geopolitical risk? Probably not. I do think that we will see perhaps some banks in places like Singapore adding more countries to their naughty list. So I have a banker, for example, that says not only can we not take Americans in Singapore, but we can't take UK citizens. If France decides to be difficult, do they add countries like France to that list where now you have fewer options to put your money? It's possible. Now, there's plenty of places to go and put your money. That's not a huge con, but it's something to be aware of. The big one that we see with families is you are seeing more countries in Europe talk about military obligations and forced military service. And so if you have someone in your family who is or will be of military service age, that is a consideration to read. What are the conditions? If you're living in Malaysia, are they going to drag you back to the country? Not always. But I would argue that if you have kids of military age, it might be better to have some kind of base somewhere else to just, again, have that European passport. And so if you can get an extra passport, in most cases, I would say you should get it. I mean, even we had one guy a number of years ago, he was eligible for French citizenship by Ancestry. That's not that common, but he got it. And sure, I would take that. Knowing that I put so little money and effort into that if I ever had to renounce that citizenship because they started to tax me no matter where I live or make my life difficult, fine. No harm, no foul. But I think it's that kind of country that I would avoid. Listen, if I could get British citizenship, I would. And we had a client not that long ago. He was going to get naturalized in the UK. I've met numerous people who have lived in the UK for a long time. Hey, did you get your UK passport? If not, why not? Get it. It's free at this point, right? But, Germany, Belgium, France, UK, these are countries that are talking about making expats' lives difficult. And so you want to be aware of that. In countries like Poland, for example, they're used to having a diaspora. One of the largest Polish populations in the world is in Chicago. And so there's a culture of that. And I've told you for years, the culture matters. In part, I am the descendant of Lithuanians. And so you've had a small country in Lithuania. Now, could they do mandatory military service because of their proximity to Russia? I'd be more worried about that. I'm not worried about them taxing me if I don't live there. And so I'd be much more interested in getting a passport in one of those, let's say, Central European countries where they are more pro-business. A country like Poland is heading in the right direction. They're going to outpace the UK in terms of wages. And so how would I go about getting a European citizenship if the pros outweigh the cons? Well, if you have citizenship by Ancestry, claim that, because you just learned it doesn't matter if the country of your ancestry is the exact country in Europe you might want to live in, because it opens up all the doors to you no matter where in Europe it is. And so Nomad Capitalist Studio helps clients get citizenship by Ancestry. They are closing the doors in some cases. Italy recently restricted who qualifies for their passport, but most European countries have some form of ancestry-based citizenship going back 1, 2, 3, or even more generations. So check your family tree. Golden visas, let's say Portugal, they are making some changes. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in Portugal. But a golden visa could lead to citizenship without having to fully move to that country. You could be able to spend a minimum of time there, pass a language test, and get that passport. Not in just a year, but you could do that over the course of 5, 6, 7 years. You could also move to a country, If you already speak English, look at Ireland or look at Cyprus. Cyprus has as fast as is a 3-year program for certain professionals to become naturalized. Ireland is 5 years for everybody. Both have tax-friendly cultures, obviously very different weather in each of those, but those are 3 ways you can get a passport. Malta had what they called the Main. It was a donation-based route to citizenship. That has now ended. However, if you're making large investments in, let's say, hiring people or buying a factory or starting a serious business, there may be countries in Europe where they would be willing to give you citizenship in exchange for making those investments, depending on their priorities. And so those are the kinds of programs Nomad Capitalist Studio is always looking out for. There's many different ways to get into Europe. You might not need the citizenship now. You might just want the golden visa and to get a cheaper citizenship somewhere else. What some clients want is they just say, give me citizenship in St. Lucia in the Caribbean, Sao Tome and Principe in Africa, and maybe get me an Eastern European or Asian citizenship with an investment. And then I'll just get a European golden visa, and I'll decide 5 years from now whether I want to get their passport. But in the meantime, I have all the ability to live there whenever I want, but not the obligation. And so you don't even have to say, do I want Europe or do I not? It could be, to what level am I going to go in on Europe? For some folks, they want the passport now. But understand, if you don't have the ancestry, you're going to either live there or you're going to make an investment. And those investments may be larger than what you would invest somewhere else, right? I mean, a golden visa in Portugal is going to cost you mid-6 figures for a residence permit that leads to citizenship, whereas you can go to the Caribbean and spend less than half that and get a passport now, or you can spend 1/5 of that and go to one of the new African citizenship countries and get a passport. And so, who benefits the most from having a European citizenship? Number 1, global entrepreneurs who want access to Europe's markets and the special treatment of being a citizen. They can afford to structure their residence smartly, so you're their resident in a tax-friendly place in Europe or somewhere else entirely. Number 2, families seeking safety, stability, and elite education options. Number 3, investors who want a great passport for reputation and mobility. We've had guys who are co-founders of 9 and 10-figure companies that say, yeah, I need a European passport in my mix, especially those that were American and wanted to give it up. There's guys who run huge global companies that they don't want to be just St. Lucian. They want that very stable, respected brand passport at their level. And so Europe accomplishes that because it is more flexible than the United States. And number 4, remote operators who can base themselves anywhere in the world, who European citizenship may not be as ideal for. Number 1, if you're chasing ultra-low taxes, again, you can still do that until they change the policies. Nomad Capitalist Studio helps Europeans move to tax-friendly countries all around the world, but long-term ultra-low taxes may not be the game of the EU. Number 2, if you want financial privacy, that's going to be harder in many ways as a European. And number 3, if you want fast, low-regulation environments, again, you can go to those places as a European. At its core, the European Union is more bureaucratic. Go to nomadcapitalist.studios, apply. We help wealthy families put together their plan B, C, D, E, and F all around the world. And I think if you have enough layers of plans, Europe probably fits in there somewhere. I'll take an EU passport if you want to give it to me, because I have so many other residences and passports that I could then afford just to get rid of the EU passport if it didn't serve me anymore. I have a certain wealth profile that even if I spent some money, 10 years from now, I would be able to get rid of it. These are all the questions you have to ask yourself. Nomad Capitalist Studio.